There is currently an ongoing genocide against men. Not all men necessarily, but certainly against the bottom 80% of men. And when I say the bottom 80% of men, I mean if you are a man and you are not in the top 20% in terms of looks, money, and status, then you are being targeted for genocide. And I know you might be thinking, wait, but I don't feel like I'm being genocided. I just got back from a trip to Walmart and I'm pretty sure nobody tried to kill me. Well, look, I'm not saying average men are being rounded up and put into concentration camps. I know there's no secret police lining us up against the wall in front of a firing squad, but there is a genocide happening right now against the male population. And here's the proof. The United Nations defines a genocide as any of the following acts committed with intent to destroy, in whole or in part, a national, ethnical, racial, or religious group as such. 1. Killing members of the group. 2. Causing serious bodily or mental harm to members of the group. 3. Deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction in whole or in part. 4. Imposing measures intended to prevent births within the group. And 5. Forcibly transferring children of the group to another group. Only one of these 5 criteria need be met in order for something to be considered a genocide. Only one. But I think we can easily make the case that at least 3, maybe 4 of these acts are currently being committed against average and below average men in the Western world. And again, when I say average and below average men, what I'm referring to is the bottom 80% of men in terms of looks, money, and status. So that's most men. So I think we can just call this a male genocide. Now, before I go over all the evidence, some of you may have noticed, well, in the UN's definition, it says a genocide can only be committed against a national, ethnic, racial, or religious group. So, by definition, a genocide can't be committed against men based on their status as being of the male sex. And yeah, that is true. By the existing definition of genocide, there definitionally could not be a genocide against men. Just like there couldn't be a genocide against women. There couldn't be a genocide against a particular age group. There couldn't be a genocide against the physically or mentally disabled. Basically, what I'm getting at is, I think the definition is flawed in that way. If the criteria for genocide is being met for people of a certain protected class just based on their membership to a group defined by certain biological characteristics they were born with, then I think we can and should refer to that as a genocide. I mean, if you would call it a genocide when the exact same acts are being committed against, say, a particular religious group, then why would it not also be called a genocide when those acts are being committed against members of a certain sex or members of a certain age group? And regardless of what you call it, I think we can agree it's bad. Okay, so with that caveat out of the way, let's look at each of these 5 criteria, and for each, we will discuss whether or not the act is currently being committed against men. First is killing members of the group. Well, no, it's not that kind of genocide. I know this criteria is what most people think of when they hear the word genocide, but really most genocides do not involve just directly killing members of the targeted group. So, no, men aren't just being lined up against the wall and executed, thankfully. And I don't think that's gonna happen. It's just not that kind of genocide. But that's only one criteria. The next criteria is causing serious bodily or mental harm to members of the group. If you ask me, and I know a lot of other men would back me up on this, there does seem to be a concerted effort by the powers that be to cause serious mental harm to all males in developed society. Just to make sure we're covering all our bases, it has been further clarified in United Nations case law what is meant by serious mental harm. It's still kind of vague, but it says, although it need not be permanent or irreversible, it must go beyond temporary unhappiness, embarrassment, or humiliation, and it must inflict grave and long-term disadvantage to a person's ability to lead a normal and constructive life. Now, maybe you disagree, but in my opinion, when I look at the messaging in mainstream media and what I get served by the social media algorithms, and from what I've observed in real life, there does seem to be an intentional effort to psychologically terrorize men, to intimidate men, make us depressed, make us feel hopeless, make us feel fear of speaking our mind in a group setting because of the ever narrowing window of which opinions are socially acceptable to hold these days. As for who exactly the powers that be are, who it is that's targeting men in this way, that's not always easy to pin down. See, the thing about the male genocide, it's not like any other genocide we've seen before. It's particularly insidious because one of the primary means of spreading this mental harm en masse is through the use of modern technology, through social media algorithms. It's happening through viral videos. It's happening through internet comments, news stories, Instagram reels, memes, and it's different things. They're attacking us through intimidation with all this content designed to demoralize us, make us feel like, as men, we just aren't welcome anywhere we go. We're not wanted in school, we're not wanted in the workplace. Women don't want us talking to them. Our opinions are oppressive by default. We're made to feel like our presence is a threat to women's safety, or at least that our presence will be perceived as such should we accidentally make eye contact with a woman at the gym one too many times. You read these bot comments on Reddit and Twitter, and I do think a significant portion of these comments are AI or bots, but there's so many comments designed to make men feel like our natural desires are disgusting. I can't even recall how many discussions I've seen on Reddit where women are talking about how they thought a guy was their friend, but then he confessed his feelings for her, and oh my god, turns out he was just using me the whole time trying to get sex. It's things like that on its own, one comment here and there, no big deal, but it's all over social media. If you use the internet at all as a man, then you can't help but end up feeling like you're defective. Or you feel like you have to hide who you truly are because every thought you've ever had is bigoted in some way, shape, or form. Even if it's not bigoted, but you feel like anything you say could be misconstrued that way. And it will be misconstrued that way. And you can't just put the phone down, by the way. You can't avoid this onslaught just by shutting down your computer. The internet is real life. Even if it is all AI bot comments, the internet is where most people get their opinions. And even if that weren't true, it's becoming increasingly difficult to do anything these days without using some kind of app. You have to look at your phone to pay for parking, to pay your rent. If you want to, change the cabin air filter on your car, you probably need to find a video on YouTube to help with that. Then you're going to end up seeing some kind of psyop targeted intimidation on the sidebar. And even if on an individual level, a man can decide to just refrain from viewing social media, that doesn't make it not a genocidal attack just because it is technically possible to avoid it. With every genocide, there are some members of the targeted group that are better than others at avoiding the attacks. But the attack is still happening. Now, with all that said, I ask you, is it not beyond temporary unhappiness, embarrassment, or humiliation to be under constant assault from these psychological operations designed to terrorize, intimidate, and demoralize? Do you think it's a stretch to say that any young man coming up these days, due to the influence of social media and the modern culture it has created, is it a stretch to say that men are forced to experience mental trauma that disadvantages their ability to lead a normal and constructive life? I don't think it's a stretch. I think the criteria is met soundly. This is a genocide, folks. Believe it. I know it's easy for most people to say, well, you can't really say there's an intentional effort to mentally harm men because all this is just coming through random sources. All these social media posts and corporate diversity seminars and whatever, these are all different people doing these things, and they're doing them for different reasons. And I understand that viewpoint. Maybe you're right. But when I look at the extreme lack of diversity of thought and the lack of diversity in the ideas and cultural norms propagated throughout this modern society, especially with what I see online, but also in real life, which again tends to align perfectly with whatever the online discourse of the day is, I do think most of the content, especially video content, probably less so with text comments, but I do think most of this content is created by regular people that are not trying to commit genocide. But I think the content is weaponized intentionally through targeted algorithms by whoever the frick it is controlling these algorithms. That's where I can't say for sure who it is. Is it the tech companies themselves? Is there government influence? Is it certain wealthy elites that are funding these social media companies? I don't know. I really don't know. But this doesn't seem random to me. I don't think they just innocently developed these algorithms and what we see just so happens to be the result. Somebody is trying to bring about the total destruction of the majority of men in Western society. My guess is there's probably a group of wealthy, influential people embedded in governments and tech corporations throughout the United States and Europe, probably also in East Asian countries. Okay, the third criteria for genocide, according to the United Nations, is any act deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction in whole or in part. Historically, what this criteria is meant to refer to is things like preventing access from food and water, herding people into confined spaces with poor conditions, aka concentration camps, or forcing people into hard labor. So with this one, I already know most people are not going to agree with me, but I do think the criteria is being met. Look, it's no secret that inflation has been out of control over the past 5 or 6 years. Food prices have skyrocketed. Housing prices have skyrocketed. Now gas prices are going way up. And maybe gas will come back down. I don't know. But even look at the recent hyperinflation with the prices of computer parts like RAM. It's ridiculous. And computing components are a basic resource required for survival in this society. That's how our society is structured. You can't even pay for parking without a smartphone. So don't even try to be like, wah, poor loser can't play his pewter games, wah. It's not about that, okay? It's not about recreation. Access to computers or smartphones is increasingly necessary in this society. Okay, so with all this rapid inflation, we're also seeing stagnant wages across the board. We are seeing a collapsing job market. I don't care what Dave Ramsey tells you, and I don't care what kind of bullshit numbers the Bureau of Labor Statistics puts out. That's gaslighting, okay? That is just misinformation, plain and simple. But look at the labor force participation rate. And compare the labor force participation rate between men and women, especially in the younger generations. Young women are out-earning young men. Young women are actually getting hired still, while young men are getting rejected so much, they just give up. And the disparity is only going to get worse. It's going to get a lot worse. Women make up the majority in pretty much every type of postgraduate and professional schools, like law school and medical school, for example. All the highest earning jobs are going to women. And it's not because women are doing better. It's not because they're more qualified. It's because they're receiving affirmative action heavily. Men have higher test scores on average when applying to these professional schools, yet women are the ones that are accepted at a higher rate. It is a fact that men are being held back in favor of women. That's a fact. Please do fact check me on that if you don't believe me. Okay, so let me connect the dots. Basic necessities like food are becoming more and more expensive, while actually earning money, specifically for men, is becoming more and more difficult. So difficult, in fact, that literally millions of men have already given up on trying to find employment. And millions more are just barely scraping by through the gig economy. So access to basic resources, food, is being gatekept from men. I realize that no council of scholars or whatever would consider this criteria to be met at this point, but we are certainly heading in that direction. Only for men, though. Costs are increasing for food and other resources that may or may not be considered basic resources, depending on who you ask. Housing, gas, etc. All these things are shooting way up in cost to the point they're becoming unaffordable for more and more people, but men specifically are being prevented from getting hired at decent jobs. Men specifically are being rejected from education even when they have superior scores. So what do you call it when one segment of society isn't allowed to make a living for themselves, while the rest of society is? I don't know about you, but I call that a genocide. Criterion number 4. Imposing measures intended to prevent births within the group. Okay, this one is easy. Just look at the modern dating landscape. Dating apps, social media. Every average man these days is well aware of the fact that the vast majority of women are only willing to date maybe 20% of men. Probably more like only the top 10% of men are having any success. If you're an average man with average looks and an average income, good luck. There are very few women these days willing to settle for anything less than a man with a 6-figure income, 6 feet tall, and really probably at least a 7 out of 10 in terms of facial attractiveness. And even those guys that pass all the tests, a lot of those guys don't even get to pass on their DNA, because women are increasingly brainwashed these days into valuing their careers above anything else. And yeah, you can say, well, that's just women's standards. It's natural selection, whatever. But ask yourself, what the hell happened to make most women's standards inflate more rapidly than the price of RAM? I'll tell you what it is. It's dating apps. It's these psyop social media algorithms. And it's all the affirmative action they receive in education and hiring, making them all financially independent. Which, by the way, who's controlling that? I bet there's a common source for all these things if you look hard enough, but I'll leave that to you as an exercise for the viewer. Okay, last but not least, the 5th and final criteria for genocide is forcibly transferring children of the group to another group. Well, most men these days aren't even getting to that point since they are imposing measures to prevent us from fathering children in the first place. But let's look at some statistics, shall we? In the United States, when there's a custody dispute between a father and a mother, on average, fathers receive 35% of total custody time, while mothers receive 65% of custody time. In roughly 80% of cases, it's the mother who has primary custody. 29% of custody cases result in one parent having sole custody. And I'm pretty sure it's usually the mother that gets sole custody. But I can't actually find any data on that. The US Census only asks about primary custody, so you can't get any information on sole custody out of that. So I don't know if I would say this criteria is necessarily being met. Maybe it is, but there's not enough data to go off of. I mean, yeah, fathers are only getting about half the time with their kids that mothers are when custody is shared, and mothers have primary custody 80% of the time. But it's also probably true that a lot of fathers didn't want primary custody. I'm not going to sit here and act like there aren't a lot of deadbeat dads out there. There's just as many deadbeat mothers, I'm sure, but the societal expectation is that the mother has custody, so I don't know. I think it's just incomplete data we have to work with here. I'm pretty sure women are heavily favored in custody decisions, but I don't feel there's enough info to say for sure that there's a mass forcible transfer of children away from their fathers. There might be. There certainly might be. I'm not saying there's not, but I would want to see more reliable data on that before I say anything conclusively. Okay, so I think I've made a solid case to prove that there is currently an ongoing genocide against men. Obviously, I know a lot of you aren't going to be convinced by this because I can't actually point to who is behind this. And I will admit, it's possible that there's not any concerted effort here at all. It could all just be various groups acting out of their own self-interest at the expense of men. But even if that is the case, that's really not any better. We're still experiencing the effects of a genocide, and it doesn't change the fact that, as far as I can tell, we are pretty much powerless to fight this. I mean, we could. We have the numbers and we have the strength on our side, but how are we ever going to organize and advocate for ourselves when most average and below average men are in denial about what's going on? Most men are contributing to their own genocide. So my suggestion to any chronically lonely, chronically discouraged men out there listening to this, just do your best to stay aware of what's going on. Try to be cognizant of the fact that the algorithms are putting certain media in front of you for a reason, and that reason is probably to demoralize and intimidate you. And maybe just get off social media entirely, or as much as you can. Get off YouTube even. Trust me, you will be perfectly fine if you don't get to watch my videos. I promise you. And spread the word. Fellas, it's a genocide. And nobody even knows about it. It's never going to get better if we, as average and below average men, don't even advocate for ourselves. Because I guarantee nobody else is going to fight for us. We have to be the ones. If you found this video insightful, or even if you didn't, please consider watching some of my other videos. There's also some secret videos you can watch for free on my Patreon, videos that YouTube does not want you to see. So check it out, no sign up required. Thank you for watching. I'll see you next time.